Hello, everyone. 11 o'clock Pacific time on the dot. Give everyone a minute to log on and get connected. You're in the right place. This is Experience Moxa's device management platform for edge compute and ignition users webinar. We'll be starting in just a minute. We are live. All right, it's 11. Let's give another minute. All right. Rush, you can hear me okay?
Yes, sound great.
Excellent. All right. 1 minute after, let's go ahead and get started. Thank you, everyone, for joining today. Hope you're all excited to learn about Moxa's new device management platform. I know I'm excited because I really do believe this can save many of you an incredible amount of time, money, and effort. Trust me, once you've experienced it yourself, you won't want to go back to the old way of doing things. You just don't. So let's start with a quick introduction. My name is Oliver Wang. I've been with Moxa for over 15 years. I started out as a technical writer working on our users' manuals. And for the past 7 years, I've been on the product marketing team supporting our edge compute line right when things started getting really interesting with industrial IoT, MQTT, and ignition. With me is Russ Tibbetts, our seasoned IIoT application engineer, but I think a better job description would be IIoT rescue worker. Russ, how about a quick introduction?
Thank you, Oliver. Yeah. Seasoned. That's not calling me old, is it?
No.
Um,
Oh, no.
so I've been with Moxa for about 6 years now, a little over 6 years. Prior to that, right at 20 years, doing a similar thing at another edge computer manufacturer. So I've been in this M2M IoT train for quite a while, and I thoroughly enjoy it. Yeah, I
All right.
like connecting edge devices.
Thank you very much, Russ. Um, so there's a lot to cover today, guys, but I'll try to keep things moving quickly. I really want to get to the demo itself, but it will help to first understand number one, Moxa's edge compute approach to IIoT, and number two, the importance and challenge of device management. Once we get through that, we'll hand things over to Russ for the live demo. Now, please don't be shy. There's a Q&A button on this Zoom interface. You can enter it at any time. I have the window open. I can monitor it live. We have ample time at the end of the webinar to go through some live Q&A. And that's where some of the most interesting discussion happens. All right. So let's talk about Moxa in industrial IoT and what our approach is. In a nutshell, Moxa provides a rugged and reliable open compute platform with an integrated LTE modem. And the open compute piece is important because this gives you the highest flexibility, the lowest cost, and it mitigates against vendor lock-in. You are not tied to Moxa or to any other hardware when you use an edge compute approach. But I will say in these four areas, Moxa offers additional edge compute tools and expertise that make those aspects of development and integration easier for our edge compute users. So if you have any combination of these requirements, you will have a much easier time and a much faster, smoother deployment with Moxa compared to other edge compute vendors. I'll go through a couple of examples. LTE users will get simple utilities to configure APN, set up network failover, monitor signal strength, and automatic scripts to maintain and recover from flaky connections. Modbus users get software connectors to easily generate software tags from Modbus devices and sync those tags with MQTT, SparkPlug-B, AWS, or Azure, or all of the above simultaneously. For Ignition and other edge SCADA users, you have ample horsepower and room to run popular native or containerized Linux applications, including Azure IoT Edge modules. and we have practical experience supporting popular pieces of software on our edge compute devices. Finally, for device management, you get a powerful set of RESTful APIs, a user-friendly GUI, and a native Azure IoT Edge module. And that means that configuration operations can be done programmatically or with a point and click interface. Now, all of these utilities are available across a range of edge compute devices, from light compute devices running on less than 10 watts of power to high performance Core i7 boxes. Even better, the device architecture is designed so you can leverage these tools and capabilities without vendor lock-in. So when you buy the hardware, you get the underlying Linux and our Linux tools to interact with the communications interface. You also have the option of buying hardware with those additional IoT capabilities that I mentioned baked into the firmware. Here's that web GUI. I mentioned the APIs for IoT and device services, as well as Docker, Azure IoT Edge, already pre-installed and integrated for easy development. In either case, the unit is still designed to be an edge compute device. So you still have full edge compute ability to install those native Linux apps or containerized apps and store data as you please. We really do have a mix of customers. Many just want the operating systems. Thank you very much. They're going to handle this stuff themselves. But many make heavy use of some or all of these additional tools. So that covers at a high level Mox's approach to IoT. Now let's talk about the importance of device management, and we'll start with a poll question. You should see that populating a little pop-up there. There we go. Number of nodes. How many edge compute nodes are you typically deploying or managing? Go ahead and enter that in. And for the sake of future viewers of this recording, what I'm going to do is, as we share these results, I'm actually going to annotate them live in the presentation. The first time we've done this. So let's give you guys a chance to answer. And all right. 3, 2, 1. Let's end the poll, share those results, and I'll type them in for the sake of our future viewers. All right, so 1 to 10, we have 46%. 1 to 10 dozens, we have also 46%. Thousands, we have 8%. Oh, we skipped right over hundreds, but very, very good. But thank you very much for answering that. So some of you have intimate experience with supporting thousands of units. So we'll talk a little bit more about that. Thank you very much. Clear that. All right. So imagine this. Some of you have already experienced this. You've deployed 200 plus IoT devices around the country that are reporting live data from remote PLCs and other equipment. And now there are issues with one or more sites. Just knowing what is going on with your units and being able to connect to one quickly for troubleshooting can be enormously challenging. Russ and I have faced every one of these questions at least once, if not multiple times, in real deployments. Maybe there was a configuration change at the site itself. Maybe there was a power surge causing a device to behave erratically. Maybe a unit was hacked and is now consuming more data than you've paid for, so your carrier shut off the tap and you can't access the data. Maybe there was a version change in the underlying software by the cloud provider, affecting how your software license is recognized. So just answering these questions is a challenge. So what next? How do you answer and address these questions? These are the most common operations that you're going to have to use for general troubleshooting and maintenance. And it's all the basic things. View device logs, update the software, reboot the device, monitor general performance after you've made a change. But if you don't have device management in place, your only option to conduct one or all of those operations may be to do a truck roll to each site and each device that requires maintenance. Now, if you've planned ahead with a device management strategy or platform, whether it's from Moxa or from some other vendor, these tasks ideally can be handled remotely and securely and at scale. So I can tell you from painful personal experience, this is not theoretical. Russ and I help support an IoT deployment with over 1,500 edge compute nodes connecting to Ignition via Sparkplug. This was pure edge compute. There was no device management platform in place. Connect to each individual unit one by one as needed. When a reporting issue emerged on one of the sites, we were able to resolve it, but it involved truck rolls to pull device logs, a process to identify and then open network ports, setting up a remote connection to the SSH console of affected units, and developing scripts to automate software update and device reboot on multiple devices. Device management would have made every single one of those steps a whole lot easier. So let's talk through some common approaches we're seeing that customers use for device management. So we just heard about this first option, and I've spoken to a lot of customers that decide, let's just worry about it later. And I get it. These customers, they're often simply trying to get to production. And incorporating a device management platform adds significant cost and time, a luxury that you simply cannot afford at that particular time. I get it. We've seen it. We've been there ourselves. Just know, worry about it later also usually leads to pay for it later. Another approach is to use something like OpenVPN or TossiBox or maybe Mox's MRC for secure remote access. That gives you on-demand connection to the remote site like it's on your local network. So this gets you connected, but it can be expensive at scale, and it still requires you to conduct operations on each device one by one. A third approach is to rely on the device management platform of commercially available routers, usually paid. This is great for managing the LTE connection itself, but typically those platforms and the hardware aren't really designed to support true edge compute. So you would need to add a TOSI box or a VPN or some other sort of tunnel to your edge compute device in order to get that full device management capability, or you just compromise and just manage LTE only and not the compute itself. So the last two options, we've seen customers that build device management on their own, and really hats off to those that succeed. It's typically an enormous amount of time and effort using tools like Ansible or Puppet that I'm personally not familiar with. And finally, there's always the option to just use a paid enterprise class IT platform like Red Hat Enterprise. Both of these options require a massive investment, commitment, and the right organizational and IT infrastructure in place for execution. Simply out of reach unless you have the backing and vision of a large corporation with ample resources and time. All right, so this is a very natural place for another poll question for you guys. So how are you handling device management right now? And if you're doing something other than what you see here, I'd love to hear more about it offline. Fascinated to hear what other people's experiences have been in this space. And I'll do the same thing. I'll sort of, for the benefit of folks that are viewing this as a recording, I'll enter the responses directly using annotations. That seemed to work pretty well, actually. All right, let's see those responses go in, give you guys a little bit more time. Pretty decent response. Like I want to cut it off, but the responses are coming in, and all all options are actually pretty represented, so it'll be interesting. I'm excited to share it. Let's go ahead and share the results, and I'll start annotating it in. All right. Worry about it later. 7%. Remote access only. 36%. Router or modem management only. 29%. Build it in-house. 7%. Enterprise IT software and team. 21%. I'm sorry it's not totally aligned, but very, very interesting. Good mix. And I'm glad all of you are on this webinar. I'm so excited to be sharing this with you. Let me go ahead and clear that and we'll move on. All right. So that covers those first two parts, the importance of device management, Mox's approach to IoT. If you haven't planned for device management, you might be in for a rough time down the road. But if you try to implement device management with currently available options, you'll also incur some pain upfront in terms of effort and cost. Moxa DLM, short for Device Lifecycle Management, was designed to mitigate a lot of these pain points. It can help edge compute and ignition users reach scale with much lower cost, effort, and lock-in, while still retaining as much flexibility and control as possible. You get a powerful set of tools to monitor, manage your connected gateways with full control over the units you enroll into the platform and who has access to it. And there's no upfront cost or vendor lock-in. You have full functionality available to you immediately upon the purchase of a Moxa AIG series device. So I think we could just dive right in at this point. Russ, you ready? Let's show them what we got.
Sounds great. Thanks, Oliver. So let me get my screen sharing here. All right. And I can see my notes. Okay. So on the first step is I'll show we've got our DLM, as Oliver mentioned, is device lifecycle management is what we termed the acronym. We go to our login web page. You create a unique set of credentials. When you sign in, you get access to your specific units. You can create multiple projects based on, you can organize them by logistics or however you decide as far as maybe end customers, different parameters. So when you click on one of the projects, then you come to this cover page, this dashboard page. It is fully customizable. We've got different widgets. I've got mine organized to see the information I want to see most. When you click on this edit button, you can add other widgets in there as well. So we can see a map geographically. You can zoom in. You can see the units that are in a certain group. And then what I'm going to do, I'll hit save on the layout and then go to the online devices. So if I click on just online devices, it's going to show me that subset. If I back up and I just go to all devices, then I'll see any of the devices I have connected. So you can then decide on how to label or group the units that are inside each project. You can have, I showed one here that has multiple labels. And then once you have them labeled, you can click on those specific categories and then it will sort to make life easier if you're finding, a certain group of units. The next piece I'd like to look at is how do we, hold on one second, my notes changed. How do we deploy updates in groups? So for example, we've got this software tab, and if we want to deploy a patch, so these are all created by Moxa. You can see there's firmware update packages. We've got a security patch that was recently done for AIG 301. So if I click on that one, it'll tell me the details of what's behind the patch, the notes. And if I hit update, either on this button here or the update button that pops up, it will show all of the units that qualify. So this is just for 301, AIG 301 model. If I select all of them, then it will give me a choice to, I can select all of them or parts of them, and then go to next. then I'll log in with my credentials for DLM. So one thing I'll back up and cover is the users and roles. You can have multiple, let me click on continue here, but you can have different users with different access. So some could have remote access to the units and others could just have configuration. So you can restrict or allow access to the users. So once I log in or give it my credentials, then it says I can install those updates now or schedule it. If I schedule it, I'm going to hit cancel here just for the sake of time of rolling out the updates. If I hit schedule, then it will show up on the scheduled task. So I'll be able to see the status and which units have been updated, which are still waiting. So let's see next, if we want to configure units in mass. So we've got this configuration tab. I've done quite a few of just various test configurations, but if we start from scratch and just create a new one, you select the model. So let's see, for simplicity, I'll do the 301 US that has the US modem in it. It's LTE connected, and then just give it a name. Yeah, G301 LTE test. So as long as it has a unique name, then it will qualify. So I can hit save as draft, and now the status of that one is draft. The rest are ready to be deployed. So if I hit edit on the side of the buttons, I don't have an option yet to deploy these units, to deploy this configuration to units, but I can hit edit and then select a different config file. Before I do that, if I want to modify it, I can hit download the config file. It's a .json, so I have that assigned to Notepad++. I can use these plugins to just make it more viewable. And now I can see the full configuration of that unit in a JSON format. There's another plugin to make life easier to browse. So if I just go, to these different categories, cellular, it will show the different parameters on each of those categories. So when I have this modified how I like it, I can just hit save, and then it saves it as the JSON file. Then I go back here to this draft version and say edit, and then close out the default one that it has and browse. And if I go to my downloads, then I've got the one I've just modified, hit open, and then submit. So once I submit it, then the status goes to ready, and then I have new options. I can say, set this as an initial configuration or deploy to devices. So if I want to deploy this, again, it's going to ask for my DLM credentials, make sure I'm authorized to do that. And now this one's for any of my units that are in my project, US modem inside the AIG 301 units. So if I select all of those, then I can deploy that configuration to as many units as I have connected. Next, as far as drilling down into the parameters of each of these units, if I go back to, say, all devices or any of these categories, just maybe the Oliver and Russ demo units, I can choose the AIG 302 as an example. And now I have access to the overview of one thing is handy that we have cellular IP addresses that will show up here. So as these units connect, they just populate this information by default. So we can see firmware versions that are running, model names, and then the different applications that are running in Things Pro, which is our software, our GUI software. So we can take snapshots of the configuration, compare them with ones that are running, just quickly to show. You can highlight the differences. So like the timestamps are different, but makes life easier in terms of seeing what's running. If you have to replace a unit in the field, you can easily recover that configuration back to the one that was swapped out. This individual software upgrade will say, we've got a new firmware available. You can just click update here, and then at a single click, you're not having to manually connect to each unit and say, install this package, for example. So next, I'm going to skip over to this remote console tab. That's probably the one I use the most personally. as far as just connecting to the units remotely one by one. So if I click on, we've got two options. SSH will give us secure, they both connect over a VPN connection. So this SSH will go to a command line of the units wherever they're at in the world, in the field. And then, so you could install or do troubleshooting at the command line level. This web console will open up. It takes a second to get the VPN established. So I've got one connected. Hopefully I'm still signed in. So first I've got this SSH command line. So I could just do whatever I do in Linux remotely through this single window through a browser. Next is the web UI. So this is, and you can customize on this latest AIG 302, you can have a cover page that says whatever you want it to say as your kind of company disclaimer or greeting. So then you log in. Now this is the specific login to this unit. So to connect to it, I use the DLM credentials, and now I've got access to the web UI, which is Things Pro on this unit that's running in the field. So I won't go through all of the settings inside of Things Pro, but it's got a, as you can see, a graphical user interface to configure the unit. The ones I want to highlight is under the maintenance tab. First of all, that's where we connect to DLM in the first place. So when these units are deployed, the only thing that needs to be done is the DLM credentials need to be given. So once, if it's not connected, you can see this one is. If it's not connected, the only thing you need to do is put in credentials, an email address and password, which is your DLM credentials, and then you select the project to connect to. Now this one's already connected to Russ and Oliver's demos, and we've got a certificate that gets downloaded. So it's using X509 certificates. So anytime this unit is online and has access to the internet, it will connect to DLM, and we can do everything else remotely from there. The next tab that I want to just show here is the security tab. OpenVPN client is configured there. So we've got OpenVPN built in. It is using that for the DLM connection. So if you want, it also allows custom certificates to be downloaded from that you create yourself. So you can use this OpenVPN connector to also connect to your private VPN. And then the last piece to just show deployment of applications remotely is this Azure IoT Edge connection. So that connects the IoT hub in a similar way. You give it a connection string, and if you're not familiar with these terms, feel free to ask questions or reach out. We can have an individual call to kind of dig deeper on the functionality. But what this gives us is ability to load applications in mass remotely. And an example that we're using is this Ignition Edge utility or application. So not to dig deep into it, but just to show where it comes from on the Microsoft Azure IoT Hub. If I go to my IoT Edge devices, that's where I deploy and configure these units remotely. So this is the AIG 302. It's very straightforward. All I need is one primary connection string once you create your device, and that gives you access, and then you can install down here's this Ignition Edge application. So it's a lot. It's a lot of ground, but I wanted to make sure to highlight that as an option in case that's interesting for others. So I think, Oliver, that is the only other thing to mention is that we do have APIs, RESTful APIs that will be able to perform any of these functions. So anything that you see here that we're doing as far as configuring or viewing, we've also got a Modbus engine in here that I didn't highlight, but anything that we do within Things Pro can be done through RESTful APIs. And that's about it. I'll pause there.
Thank you very much, Russ.
Sure
Really
thing.
appreciate it. We're really just showing you the very tip of the iceberg. Everything that Russ showed, from the DLM interface to the APIs on the physical AIGs themselves. There's a lot to unpack there, but what we wanted to do was give you this initial high-level intro and walkthrough. So Russ, let me go ahead And I think, there we go. Resuming to the presentation. And really, there isn't any more presentation. That was the demo. At this point in time, the rest of the session is reserved for questions, but before we jump into the Q&A portion, we did have this one last poll question. In case we get disconnected or if we're not able to answer your question online, if you would like us to connect with you after this webinar to go into your project in more detail, just let us know. We'll get the record and the attendee responses of the webinar. Just let us know. I'll give you guys a moment to decide. And of course, you can reach out to us on LinkedIn. If you have our email address, you can also reach out. But this sort of helps us understand if we're hitting the mark in terms of our content and in terms of the technology that we're presenting to you. So we don't need to share the results of this poll. We can just go ahead and give you a few more minutes, end it. And then with that, let's go ahead and take some live questions. So if you have any questions, go ahead and use the Q&A tab. All right, I'm monitoring it now. Thank you very much. All right, how does this compare to something like what Stratus offers? Very good question. I don't have direct experience working with Stratus. My understanding is Stratus skews much more to the very high-end compute, provides a very full-featured virtualization platform and load balancing. Also, it's on that scale of paid enterprise IT sort of level of cost and capability. So a very capable system, but maybe out of reach depending on what your use case is, your volume, the type of budget, and how you're passing along that cost to your customers. So very, very different architecture and approach. Also very valid. All right. What is the cost for DLM? Excellent question. DLM is included in the cost of the AIG unit itself. We are offering access to the DLM platform 3 years for free with the purchase of the AIG device. And we're still looking at how we can extend that in the future. But there is zero cost. When you buy an AIG, you have immediate access to that DLM platform. You can create your login, enroll your devices, and I strongly encourage any AIG user to do that now. All right. Additional questions. All right. Is it possible to run Moxa DLM on premise instead of in the cloud? That is a very, very good question. Actually, when years ago, when we first introduced Things Pro as a piece of software, that was one of our early engagements with the whole concept of device management, really custom building a device management platform that runs on premise. It was a very, very difficult and painful process. So we've been there. This current iteration of DLM, very, very solid. It's currently a cloud offering only, but in 2025, we will expand that offering carefully to an on-premise solution. We just have to choose the right initial partner so that we develop it in the correct way and have the right capabilities. So it is in the roadmap, just not available today. All right, some of my questions are scrolling off screen. Is there a reason that this functionality cannot be added after the fact to a Moxa unit that I already own? That is an excellent question. I'm not a software architect guy, so I don't know the full technical details about this. I do know that how we have architected the platform and those APIs, it's baked into the firmware and it's secured with a hardware root of trust, which means it has to be in the firmware and shipped that way. And then the additional, if you had a unit that didn't have those APIs and those those IoT device services built into the unit when you bought it. We don't currently have a way for that to connect to DLM, but it is a topic that is very much under discussion by our dev team. How do we support our existing users that have experienced the pain and do see the value of device management? So not a solved problem, but something that we are working on and looking at. All right, so this is a question that I think I might need your help with, Russ. Does Moxa DLM replace the ignition EAM module?
Great
Maybe
question.
we maybe we need to even explain what that does. But
Sure.
Russ, you want to take that one?
You bet. Yeah. So the EAM module is specific to inductive's ignition. And what it gives is the ability to remotely manage deployments of their projects within Ignition. So it's specific to that application. So this would be what we're offering is complementary to that. It doesn't conflict. It doesn't do the same thing in either case. So EAM won't manage our hardware or the applications or the firmware that's running on the hardware. It's specific to Ignition. So we don't manage what EAM does, and it doesn't do what DLM does. If there's more questions on that, I'm happy to connect later if that wasn't clear.
It's a really good point, Russ, and maybe I'll add a little bit to that. A lot of the edge compute approach, even with software providers that we work with, the focus has been on the software itself, how to update the software, how to manage that software, and they'll very powerful tools whether you use Azure IoT Edge or you use Ignition Edge module. The gap that we're solving with DLM is on the hardware side. It's how to configure the IP addresses, how to configure the firewall rules, how to set the LTE connection, how to set the Wi-Fi connection. And those are things that a software platform really can't do very easily, right? And so that is what DLM does that a software update module like EAM wouldn't do. Is that an accurate sort of take on that, Russ?
Exactly right. Yep.
All
Well said.
right. So here's another question. Russ, you did a great job showing the capabilities DLM and on the software update module. Is it possible to host our own software modules to be managed and deployed through Moxa DLM? I think I know the answer. Russ, if you want to take first crack at that.
Sure. Yeah, currently the DLM modules are just Moxa specific packages. We do have in the roadmap, the plan is for the self-hosted, so the non-SaaS model that we host, that capability will then be included to write your own modules and download them as far as other packages, maybe just Linux packages. But for right now, anything deployed through DLM is the Moxa specific packages.
Thank you, Russ. I can totally understand the reason for this question because, like I said, once you start using a platform like Moxa DLM, immediately you're like, wow, it's so easy to do such and such. Wouldn't it be great if I could also upload my own module, click on it, and apply it to 15 devices or 1,000 devices all at once? Currently, the architecture that we see that makes that the most easiest is through the Azure IoT Hub using the Azure IoT Edge modules, and that's the closest thing from a software standpoint. So you still have that option, and that kind of speaks to, again, the Mox approach of trying to provide as close as possible an open compute platform and solve the problems that are difficult to solve for edge compute, but not try to solve other problems that are already being solved by partners and by software providers. All right. Oh, more questions. Is it, oh, sorry, no, I just answered that question. Are there plans to support this on Moxa's rack mount servers? An interesting question. on the rack mount servers, which are almost like IT class x86 platforms that aren't usually using LTE to connect to something, there's kind of a different ecosystem already in place. Those tend not to need the Modbus, the LTE, the device management provided by Moxa, because those may be in an environment where there's easy operator access and you have access to IT class software and utilities. So there isn't currently a plan to expand Moxa DLM to cover that particular use case. That said, we are very customer demand driven. If you have a project and it does require that kind of specific requirement, talk to us. We can always talk to the dev team, see what's possible, give you a straight answer. If we can do it, what the time frame would be, if there's any associated costs involved with that. All right. All right. Don't be shy, guys. Still have a little bit more time. I have one more question that looks like that just came through. Does Moxa have customers using this in production? Yes, we do have customers using this in production, not yet for 1,000 units. A heads up, the Moxa DLM that you saw has been in public preview for over a year. So we had customers, large corporate customers, that were developing their own IoT gateway using edge compute, but benefiting again from the APIs and the open platform that we provided, that are making heavy use of Moxa DLM to maintain and update those units and monitor those units once they are deployed. So it is in production. It is still a fairly new offering, but I am very, very excited. I see it being relevant to so many of our current and prospective customers. All right. I feel like I've spoken enough. Give you guys a few more minutes to see if you have any more follow-up questions. And if not, that's fine. We have the results of the webinar portal. If there's those of you who were either too shy to ask during this or want us to have a deeper dive, we'll reach out to you after this webinar. But it is 11:42. I'm not going to make everyone sit around 18 minutes while I try to fill time. We'll go ahead and call it. Thank you, everyone, for your time today, for learning about the Moxa DLM platform. We look forward to supporting your requirements. And everyone, have a great rest of your Tuesday.
Thank you.
Thanks, Russ. Thanks, everyone.